And it's a story about 3 dogs. But these dogs were not ordinary dogs. These dogs were magical dogs. And the first dog's name was Barney McCabe. Now let me hear you all sing that with me like this. Barney McCabe. Hey, you know what? That was a pretty poor performance. In the old days, everyone participated because the only music they had was the music they made themselves. So let's try it one more time with everybody participating. Are you ready? Let's call those dogs together like this. Barney McCabe. And the next dog's name was Doodly-Doo. Sing that with me. Doodly-Doo. And the third dog's name was Sue Boy. Sing that with me. Sue Boy. Now these 3 dogs live with their master Jack and his twin sister Mary over in that little itty-bitty cottage way at the edge of the deep, dark Douglas fir forest. Now one day Mary said to Jack, Jack, what do you say you and me go on a great big adventure in the woods together? Now Jack was a very wise child. He said, Mary, before we go off in the woods, we better tell Mama where we're going, because you know how worried Mama gets if we go off in the woods. So they went and they told their mother. And I guess you all have a little hands-on experience with mothers. You probably know exactly what she said. She said, oh, children, don't do it. If you go off in the woods, you'll get eaten by a dragon I'll never see again. And Jack said, Mama, calm down. Hey, let's all do that together. Help me out. Let's do it like this. We'll go, calm down. Now, Mother said, Jackie's a very wise child. He said, Mama, he said, we both know there's no such thing as dragons. And besides, Mama, you know I have 3 dogs who are loyal and true. And if anything bad happened to me and Mary, you'd send the dogs off into the woods. They'd bring us home safe and everything would be okay. But you know the way mothers can sometimes be. She's like this. She's like, oh, children, what if you're so far from home that when you call for the dogs don't hear you, and then you get eaten by a dragon? And Jack said, Mama, calm down. Now Mother said, Jackie's a very wise child. He said, Mother, Mama, he said, you know there's no such thing as dragons. He said, besides, Mama, you know, in my pocket I have 3 grains of magic corn, and everybody knows all you have to do is take a grain of magic corn out of your pocket, hold it up in the moonlight, throw it down in the sand, and something good is always going to happen. But you know the way mothers can sometimes be. She's like this. She's like, oh, Jack, oh, good grief, Jack. Oh, goodness gracious, Jack. Oh, what if you get in trouble 4 times? You've only got 3 grains of magic corn, then the dragons will find you the leech I'll never see again. Jack said, Mama, calm down. Now, Mother said, Jackie's a very wise child. He said, Mother, he said, we both know there's no such thing as dragons. And before you become completely hysterical, Mama, he said, let's use a little bit of magic. He said, Mama, do you see that glass of milk on yonder kitchen cupboard? He says, Mama, when that glass of milk turns to blood, you'll know me and Mary are in some very serious trouble. And you can let the dogs loose, and they'll come and rescue us, and everything's gonna be okay. Well, believe it or not, the mother calmed down. She gave Jack and Mary a ripe golden pear to take for their lunch, and those kids went for their walk in the woods. And they walked and they walked and they walked. And around lunchtime, they stopped and ate those pears, because they were plenty hungry, and those pears were mighty delicious. But after lunch, they just kept walking further from the house. And it was getting later and later and later, and the shadows were getting longer and longer and longer, and it was getting darker and darker and darker. And that's about the time that Mary heard a little sound that made her feel just the slightest bit scared. And it went like this. Well, you know it was an owl. But Jack and Mary were city kids. They never heard an owl. Mary turned to Jack and she said, Jack, what was that sound? Now, Jack, he was a very wise child, but he was honest too. He said, Mary, I have no idea what that sound was, but he said, I got some bad news, sister. He said, I'm afraid we're going to have to spend the night right here in the forest, because we walked so far from home. And you know, that's about the time that they saw the witch's house. Now, they didn't know it was a witch's house because they were city kids, but look for yourself. Look at those long black curtains in the front window, those weird little skulls on the handle of the doors, the black curtains on the third story window, that red shingle roof going on the yellow brick chimney, that weird curl of smoke around it. This is why it's got to be a witch's house if I've ever seen one. So Jack and Mary went up the door, and you know what they did? They knocked. And the old witch came to the door and she said, "Oh, what nice, ripe, fat, juicy children. Won't you all come in for supper?" Well, Jack and Mary went in the house, and they looked at the witch, and they looked at each other, and there were two things they noticed right away. The first thing they noticed was that old witch didn't look like a very trustworthy-looking person. And the other thing they noticed, and this really caused them some concern at the time, in her hand she had a knife. 4.5 feet long. And the knife's name was Tommy Hawk. And the old witch said to the children, "Oh, I'll bet you're so tired after that long walk in the woods. Why don't you go right upstairs and climb in my great big feather bed, and while you're fast asleep, I'll make you a really beautiful supper." Well, Jack and Mary went up the stairs. Jack and Mary climbed in their great big feather bed. Now, do you think Jack and Mary went to sleep? I don't think so. Don't be ridiculous. Of course they didn't go to sleep. It's an old American folk tale. They sat on the edge of that bed with their hands cupped around their ears, listening to each and every sound that was coming out of that kitchen, because down in that kitchen, that old witch wasn't making supper at all. You know what she was doing? Exactly. In one hand she held Tommy Hawk, that long sharp knife, and in the other hand she had a sharpening stone. And she was sharpening that blade till it was sharp as any samurai sword. And while she sharpened, she was singing this song. She was singing, "Penny, get your knife. Penny, get your knife. Penny, get your knife. Go sharpen, sharpen." Hey, can we all sing it together? Will you help me out? Let's sing it like this. We're going to sing. Well, penny, get your knife. Penny, get your knife. Penny, get your knife. Go sharpen, sharpen. Well, Jack hollered downstairs. He said, "Wait a minute. Didn't you just get through telling us you were going to make us a really beautiful supper?" And the old witch said, "Whoops, I better sing more quietly." So she put on her public library voice and began singing in a whisper. And if all of you will appropriate your public library voices, we're going to sing her song in the littlest whisper we got. Real quiet now. Make it real quiet. We're all going to sing it in a whisper just like this. You ready? Here we go. Oh, Penny, get your knife. Penny, get your knife. Penny, get your knife. Go sharpen, sharpen. Well, that's when Mary turned to Jack. She said, "Jack, you know what I think?" She said, "I don't think we're safe here." So they went over to that third-story bedroom window. They lifted the sash. Jack took that first grain of magic corn out of his pocket. He threw it out the window and whoosh, up grew a 44-foot ladder right up to that third-story bedroom window. But before they left, Mary turned to Jack and said, "Jack, did you notice in that bedroom across the hall there was a great big stack of itty-bitty pumpkins just about the size of a kindergartner's head?" So they went in that bedroom. You know what they found? A big old stack of tiny pumpkins. They really were just about the size of a kindergartner's head. They filled their arms with these pumpkins. They went back in the witch's bedroom. And they placed them in her bed in two perfectly straight lines. So when they pulled the blankets up over it, it looked like there were two little kids fast asleep under the covers. Then they scampered down the ladder and disappeared into the deep, dark Douglas fir forest. Well, about that time, the old witch was a-coming upstairs. And in one hand, she had old Tommy Hawk, that long, sharp knife, and in the other hand, she had a meat tray. And she went right over to that bed, and she set down her tray, and she reared back on that knife, and she reached out for those blankets, and she got a hold of those covers, and she pulled back on that coverlet, and ooh-wee! Was she angry when she saw those little pumpkins and realized that Jack and Mary had tricked her. So she climbed down the ladder and began pursuing Jack and Mary through the deep, dark Douglas fir forest. Well, about that time, old Jack just happened to look over his shoulder, and he happened to notice the old witch was a-gaining on him. So he reached in his pocket, found that second grain of magic corn, threw it down in the sand. Up grew a Douglas fir tree about 398 feet tall. Jack and Mary climbed to the top of this, the tallest tree in the forest, clinging to its topmost branches, holding on for dear life, swaying in the moonlight, looking down hundreds of feet at the top of the witch's hat. And it's a good thing they held on tight, because when that old witch got to the bottom of the tree, she said a magic word, and old Tommy Hawk the knife turned into old Tommy Hawk the axe. And she started chopping down the tree with each swing of her axe. A piece of the tree trunk flew away from the tree, and the old witch was singing, a chip off the old block, a chip off the new, a chip off the old block, a chip off the new, a chip off the old block, a chip off the new. Hey, I got a great idea. Put your hands flat in your lap and make them quiet. Open your mouths and sing with me. A chip off the old block, a chip off the new. Chip off the old block, chip off the new. Chip off the old block, chip off the new. Chip off the old block, chip off the new. And that's when Jack decided he better holler for the dogs. Let's call them together. You ready? Barney McCabe and Doodly-Doo. And who's the third one? Sue Boy. And Jack said, you guys better get here right away. We managed to get ourselves in such a mess of trouble. But the dogs didn't come, 'cause Mama was right. They were way too far away. All the kids heard was a chip off the old block, a chip off the new. Chip off the old block, chip off the new. Chip off the old block, chip off the new. Chip off the old block, chip off the new. Chip off the old block, chip. And that's when Jack remembered the third grain of magic corn. He reached in his pocket, he found that grain of corn, he held it up in the moonlight, he threw it down in the sand, and back home on that kitchen counter, that glass of milk turned to blood. And Mama let the dogs loose. And the dogs were out in the front yard, and the dogs were sniffing and pointing and trying to figure which way the kids went. And the dogs started singing their song. They were singing, well, Master, Master, we're coming all the time. Master, Master, we're coming all the time. Master, Master, coming all the time. Master, Master, we're coming all the time. Master, Master, coming all the time. Hey, can we all sing it together? You ready? Well, Master, Master, we're coming all the time. Master, Master, we're coming all the time. Master, Master, coming all the time. Master, Master, we're coming all the time. Chip off the old block, chip off the new. Chip off the old block, chip off the new. Chip off the old block, chip off the new. Chip off the old block, chip off the new. Chip off the old block. And that's when Jack said, what is taking those dogs so long? So in one last desperate attempt to save the life of him and his sister, he hollered. And we can holler together if you're ready. Barney McCabe and Doodly-Doo and Sue Boy. He said, you guys better get here right away. We sure don't have a whole lot of time left. Well, this time the dogs did hear, and they started running as fast as they possibly could. And they were singing their song as fast as they possibly could. And now we're all going to try to sing the dog song together as fast as we possibly can. Take a deep breath because you're going to need it. Ready? Well, Master, Master, we're coming all the time. Master, Master, we're coming all the time. Master, Master, coming all the time. Master, Master, we're coming all the time. Master, Master, coming all the time. Master, Master, we're coming all the time. Master, Master, coming all the time. Master, Master, we're coming all the time. Master, Master, coming all the time. Master, Master, we're coming all the time. Master, Master, coming all the time. Chip off the old block, chip off the new. Chip off the old block, chip off the new. Chip off the old block, chip off the new. Chip off the old block, chip off the new. Chip off the old block. And at that very moment, the old witch had cut all the way through that giant Douglas fir tree trunk. And that old tree started falling to the earth below. But before it crashed to the forest floor, Jack and Mary leapt out of the treetop and landed on the ground on their own 2 feet. And it's a good thing they did, because that's when the dogs showed up. And old Barney McCabe went over and snatched Tommy Hawk right out of the witch's hand. And Doodly-Doo knocked the witch over, and Sue Boy grabbed that old witch by her collar and spun her through the air 3 times, and she landed in the river where the river bends. And that's the way this story